Hello and welcome to 2020. I'm Traci Harding and this is another book vlog. Today I'm here to talk to you, as promised, about The Alchemist's Key. This was my first standalone novel. It was released in 1999, although I actually started writing this book straight after The Ancient Future. It was going to be my next book because I was never going to do a sequel and I was never going to do a trilogy. But, well, that didn't work because I'd started researching this when I got a letter from my publishers asking me if there was perhaps a trilogy in The Ancient Future. And I've told you the story about my psychic actually pre-warning me about that. And so I'd gone into writing the last two books in the Ancient Future trilogy before I got back to this one. And it's probably a good thing because this probably would have been a very different book had I gone straight into it, because this was not really going to be about alchemy. This was actually more about the Hellfire Club. Francis Dashwood and the Hellfire Club, who used to get together to theorize and, like a kind of underground kind of science society, come theosophical society. There was lots of rumors about them that they worship the devil or play cards with the devil or all that sort of stuff. But I found them really intriguing. And so I was going to do a book about them, but actually that story kind of transferred into just one of the character stories within The Alchemist's Key, in one of the historical flashbacks, and we have a few of those in The Alchemist's Key because I'll tell you what it's about in a minute actually. The book was published in 1999. The ebook came out whenever ebooks were a thing, I don't know, 2008. And it's also been published on audiobook, and we will get to an audio excerpt a little bit later in this vlog. So what The Alchemist's Key ended up being about was about a young guy from Australia who has British heritage that he's completely unaware of, and he inherits this huge estate and manor in England. And when he moves there with all his equipment into this house that has not been technologically upgraded for reasons, then he triggers all this time phenomenon in the house, and they have to figure out why. And it's got to do with alchemy and sacred geometry, and all sorts of fascinating things get caught up in this book. But it's not one of my heavier books. It's one of my lighter romps. It's a good fun time with Wade and Arthur McCloud the cat and all their mates. And I won't say any more than that because that would be spoilers. For The Alchemist's Key, there wasn't a hell of a lot of research on this one. I didn't even put a bibliography in the back of the book because a lot of the research I did was stuff like peerages in England or the development of the manor house and things like that. So they weren't kind of books that it was mainly just internet stuff. But the book that did trigger the idea is this one, Dashwood, the Man and the Myth, which was all about Francis Dashwood, or is it Charles Dashwood? Francis Dashwood, and his Hellfire Club. And so his character kind of developed into John Ashby for the book, and this was all set around the same time because Francis was also into the Royal Society, which was where all the scientists and the philosophers and the thinkers and inventors all met up in that day and age. And also he was into, alchemy and occult matters and masonry. Definitely, he did a lot of building. He had a beautiful manor that had all these beautiful summer houses, and that was the inspiration for the Temple of Knowledge. Actually, he built a temple. I'll see if I can find a picture, and if I can, I'll shove it up. Also, I did a lot of research into secret societies, so keepers of the secrets, unlocking the mysteries of secret societies. And then, what's the point of doing anything on alchemy without consulting Jung? So, yeah, Jung on alchemy was another one that I referenced a little bit. So that was about it, really, I think, for the research. Except for periods, like researching different periods within the book, what it was like to be in an asylum in the 18th century, 19th century. Not a good place to be. So again, I'm combining the reader questions with the underlying themes because they inevitably tie in together. As with my first question, which was from Steve. And Steve wanted to know why I picked the particular shapes that I did for the crystal keys that go in the machine. Was there any particular reasoning behind that, or was it just a random selection? Well, no, not a random selection. Those particular shapes are what you call platonic solids, and there's only 5 of them. And platonic solids are shapes that nature uses or nature builds into itself. Let me explain.
Platonic solids are named after their namesake, Plato. Before his time, they were called Pythagorean solids because Pythagoras taught them in his mystery school. There are only 5. Each one is a polyhedron, a solid with flat faces, of which every face is a regular polygon of the same size and shape. Each relates to a different element: earth, air, fire, water, ether. Platonic solids are the basic building blocks of all life, the language of creation, used and described in many religions and cultures for thousands of years. Each of the platonic solids and their associated elements, chakras, and energies are used in natural healing, metaphysical studies, spiritual endeavors, and alchemy.
So there you go, that's platonic solids. Also, I had a question from Gavin, and Gavin's question was not really so much about the book. It's about why the book hasn't been developed as a game. He's asking if I've been approached by anyone to develop this as a game, and he reckons that if he was a programmer, he'd be all over it. And that he wishes that he knew one. So, yeah, of course we've thought about the game applications seriously. But at the moment, I'm just keeping all those rights together because we've actually developed the book into a film script that's just sitting there waiting to happen. And quite often they like to have those rights attached to the project. Not that I wouldn't, I would be open to developing it as a game first. Either way around it goes. We just haven't had the right offer. But you will see from the trailer that I did at the beginning of this vlog, we actually had some animation that we had already put together. My partner of the time and I were working on, well, he was doing most of the work, I was just doing the directing. And we had actually created some animations, which I will be showing to you at the moment while I'm talking about this. So you can see that it's not something that we haven't thought about, it's just we haven't had the right offer as yet, and we're just waiting to see how it unfolds. And then maybe the last subject that we want to talk about in underlying themes for this book, or the one I've been asked about, is ORME, orbitally rearranged monatomic elements. So I just put together a bit of a piece about that. So let's have a look at that tutorial.
ORME is related to starfire and has many names: the Philosopher's Stone, the Elixir of Life, White Powder Gold, Manna, the Food of the Gods, Ghost Gold, and the Alchemist's Key. ORME is an acronym for Orbitally Rearranged Monatomic Elements. The phrase was coined by David HUDSON, as ORME is the Hebrew word for the Tree of Life.
It all began with a farmer, a cotton farmer, a third-generation cotton farmer just outside Phoenix called David HUDSON. He's your average American farmer. He wasn't a physicist, he wasn't a scientist, he was nothing. He certainly wasn't an alchemist. He was destined to become all of them. But what they discovered was that it was reading all of these zero weights, below zero, but they thought, well, what about the pan? That should weigh something. So they tipped the material out and put the pan back, and it suddenly weighed more without the material in it than it did when it was in it. This stuff was not only levitating, it was carrying the pan with it. So they discovered that this stuff would levitate, they discovered it would disappear, they didn't quite know why or where it went to, and they knew that it was important for energy. They knew that if it was a superconductor, it could attract energy, it could store energy, and it could distribute energy. The old stories of the powder and the Ark of the Covenant began to ring bells here about this potential, that they had the ability with the use of this material to store and distribute enormous quantities of energy. So it's no wonder they will levitate and whatever. You know, there's nothing to them, but cooling will make them heavy.
There are 8 known monatomic elements. These 8 transition group elements can, in a monatomic, superdeformed, high-spin and low-energy state, lose their chemical reactivity and metallic nature, thereby resulting in the state of superconductivity, a resonant condition complete with Meissner magnetic fields and Cooper pairs, which are electrons that have changed into photons. It is said that because these metals remain stable in a monatomic form, they can aid levitation. There are 0-point energy field applications due to the superconductivity, which David HUDSON describes as liquid light flowing at the speed of sound.
It was said that this was the food of the light body. They said we all have bodies, but we don't just have physical bodies, we have light bodies. And just as we feed our physical bodies, they said, we have to feed our light bodies so that they will be nurtured and grow in the same way. They have to be as fulfilled as the physical body. And they call the light body the car. Well, it's interesting because scientists in recent times have actually called this material the light of life, because it resonates with DNA on the same frequency. It's a light wave. We find lots of references to McCloud. This relief here, this picture, this drawing was actually done by the Russian scholar Emanuel Velikovsky, and he drew this up simply to give us an image of this relief at Karnak, at the Temple of Karnak. This shows the treasures of the Pharaoh Thutmosis, the third. McCloud in Egyptian law was always portrayed as a cone shape. Now these things sit there in the gold section, and it says underneath, these are gold, but we call them bread. The Alexandrians wrote of them and said they were called the Great White Brotherhood because they were absolutely obsessed with a mysterious white powder. And they made some interesting comments. They said that they call it the paradise stone, and it has unique qualities in as much as that it can weigh far more than its own original quantity of gold. But even a feather can tip the scales against it. So it can be a lot heavier than the gold it came from, or it can be lighter than a feather. This stuff has the ability to change its weight very, very dramatically.
David Hudson connected ORME with the Hebrew manna, which literally means, what is it? This phrase is found repeated over and over again in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. The historical and psychological implications include ORME as a part of the Melchizedek priesthood and the metallurgical foundry at Qumran, where the Essenes were located. I will go more into this subject and Starfire when I do the book vlogs for the Mystique trilogy.
They were fed simply orally with these materials, with monatomic elements, these powders, regularly and irregularly, just to test the reaction. Well, the results were, in their words, staggering. Sean Adam, he wrote, "What we are seeing here is really quite amazing. The tests show it to be highly effective. The effect is immediate and cumulative." What they do here is to work on brainwave patterns, and they try to synchronize these things, and they found that this material could do it. The theory and the logic behind it is that the better balancing between left and right brain produces, and these are their words, a greater intelligence, enhanced creativity, improved mind-body coordination, more agility and less stress. Well, okay, that makes sense. If we're operating as we should be, that's what we should have. But we're none of us really operating as we should be. We're operating with all of this left brain thing going and not too much of the right. Well, here are the charts here. These are just average charts. There are hundreds and hundreds of these. They took everybody's brainwave scans as they were going along. Now the top chart shows a normal starting base, where in effect, and this would be any one of us at any moment in time, the brain waves coming off the left side were far outweighing those, the red ones, on the right-hand side of the brain. The effects, they say, is immediate and cumulative. At the bottom is the first immediate effect. What happens is that the left has now contracted back to meet the right, and the right's grown just a little bit, but they've absolutely synchronized. The left and the right brain of this person, and this is the immediate effect, has now begun. And then they say it's cumulative, because what then happens is that it all grows to where the blue one was at the beginning. Quite extraordinary. Our research clearly shows that the left-right brain imbalances predominate in many mental behavioral dysfunctions, such as dyslexia and ADHD. It is our professional opinion that the monatomic products would be of tremendous benefit in any of these conditions.
There seems to be some debate over whether it is safe to ingest ORME as a means to repair DNA, to enhancing health and psychic power. If you don't know what a substance is or where it came from, best not consume it. The good news is that ORME's precious elements naturally occur in herbs, fruits and numerous vegetables. Grapes have a very high content of rhodium and iridium, more than the equivalent amount of virtually any other fruit or food. So eat well, live well, and let your soul evolve in its own good time.
So where did the Alchemist Key venture? Well, actually, not very far. It starts in Australia, but quickly moves over to Oxfordshire and the Manor House there, and doesn't really move. And this is why the Alchemist Key would develop so well as a movie, because it's all set in one gorgeous location in this manor house in Oxfordshire. And I mean, we do go out for a day at the races and stuff like that, but most of the shifts are actually in time rather than in space. We do have, towards the end, we do go venturing out in a time warp, which is a bit exciting for our characters, but most of the time warps take place inside the house. Between the 1600s and now, with Arthur, the ghost cat, as our guide in and out of the time portholes. So yeah, fun. Go and read it if you haven't read it. So now it's time for our Belinda audio excerpt from The Alchemist Key, which was read by Richard Piper. Most of my regular readers were away, so I had to audition a new one. And Richard's just his demo reel had me laughing. He had so much character in his voice. It was so awesome. So I picked Richard Piper to be the narrator. And yeah, I had fun putting together the visuals for this one. Oh my God. But you will spot some real footage of Arthur McCloud in there. So here it is. Enjoy. See you on the other side.
He moved down the staircase and through the great hall, where the front doors were open wide. The great fountain and the estate grounds were shrouded by an unearthly mist. Neither day nor night prevailed, but an eerie kind of twilight. Wade had been here before. He turned left and made his way towards the side of the house where the gazebo was located. Only now the temple stood in its stead, and Arthur guarded the entrance. As Wade approached the dwelling, the cat hissed incessantly, warning him against proceeding further. The temple door crept open, and a deep growl was heard from within. A great wolf-like hound sprang from the shadows to attack the feline. Fear beset Wade's heart at the sight of the huge canine, though the dog seemed to have little interest in him. The cat was eventually persuaded to flee, the dog hot on his heels. Beyond the open door, the temple was begging to be explored. The interior of the circular dwelling was lush. The heavy velvet curtains on the curved windows were drawn open to allow the spooky exterior light to illuminate the chamber's extravagant furnishings. In place of the gazebo's central marble column, there now stood a much larger room. On the opposite side of the rounded feature, there was a door that opened as Wade neared it. Within was a staircase that spiraled down and around a huge metal beam. This beam was part of the base of the metal spike that rose to a pinnacle far beyond the glass apex of the roof. Wade descended in search of the sturdy beam's source to find a perfectly rounded library area that was the same dimensions as the room above. The great metal pole, however, disappeared into the solid timber floor. Wade moved further into the room. Beyond the reading lounges and side tables, he came to a writing desk where a large notebook lay open. There on the page before him was a hand-drawn copy of the mosaic that was set into the floor of the marble dining room. Apart from the cross with triangles at each point, there were some scribbled notes next to each of the different triangular images. Wade was not given a chance to absorb the information, as the room was suddenly engulfed in flames. "Grandfather!" cried a lad who came charging down the spiral staircase. He threw back a rug located between the reading lounges, then lifted a trapdoor in the floor beneath. Unlike the episodes Wade had experienced in the house, the boy seemed oblivious to Wade's presence. This young man was Ernest Ashby, 5 or 6 years older than the last time Wade had glimpsed him. "That contraption will be the death of you," he cried down through the hole in the floor. "Leave it, we must get out of here." As Ernest descended to the lower level, Wade followed him down another staircase. This room was much larger than the 2 previous floors and housed a huge apparatus of mind-boggling proportions. "Take this, quickly," An aged John Ashby placed a peculiarly shaped object in a wooden box before handing it to his grandson. "You must hide this and my notebook from your father." "Come with me now, and you can hide them yourself," Ernest begged. The aging Baron grabbed hold of the boy and shook him. "You keep your promise to me, Ernest. Your father and his peers must not discover the power source. It is not the right time." The lad, wide-eyed with horror, nodded in accord. "Now go," the Baron urged, "and don't come back no matter what happens, understand?" Ernest backed up a few steps, his teary eyes fixed on his grandfather, before he turned and quickly fled the burning structure. With the lad's departure, John seemed to calm down. "My discovery shall be buried with me," he said, taking a seat to await his fate. He then turned his sights to Wade. "Immortality will be mine," he told him, as the flaming ceiling timbers collapsed in on them both.
Thank you so much, Belinda, for letting me use that audio grab from the book. I hope you enjoyed it. That's about it from me and this video blog. I'll be putting, well, I've probably already put up a poll to figure out which vlog we're doing next. I don't know what that is at this stage. It'll be a surprise. But thank you for joining me. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please send this out to anyone who loves my work and probably doesn't know I've got a YouTube channel. That would be awesome, because there's lots of people out there that don't know yet. If you want to follow me, I'm on Facebook. If you want a mentoring session, over to allthingstraci.com, or I've put up some new spiritual readings over there if you're interested. So yeah, lots of things going on. You can also support me on Patreon if you like. Find me at Traci Harding on Patreon, and I think that's about it. Many blessings. Welcome to 2020. I hope you're having an awesome year, and I'll see you for next month's vlog. Bye.